come on. There's just no way. How is this engine locked up?
What is up, YouTube? So, today we're starting the day off with some problems. Now, this is the motor out of that other Magnum. I fired it up on camera. We saw it all start. And I know you might be thinking to yourself, hey, the last time I saw this, you had all the clutches on, it was all ready to go. And I thought we were ready to go too, but last night, I went to turn it over by hand on the clutch for whatever reason, and it won't turn over either direction. So I thought, okay, maybe something was up with the clutch. Maybe I'm hitting something on the backside. I didn't put something together right. No, I pulled the clutch off. Can't turn over from the recoil. So now pull the whole recoil off because I'm hoping it has something to do with when I put the starter in. Maybe I jammed the starter gear in a little sideways and won't let it move. Because if something was in the motor, like something got dropped in by one of my kids in the intake side or the exhaust side, whenever I turned the clutch backwards, it would move. You know, or if it had a bent valve or something like that, you can generally move it in one direction but not the other. Because aside from if it's not to do with the starter gears, then yes, that is very bad news. Somehow the motor managed to lock up over the last week and a half when I started it. So I don't know. We're going to see. Well, I guess that had been about 2 weeks ago when I started this motor. I'm going to rip that off and see. Hopefully this isn't a major issue because I really don't want to have to tear this motor all the way down and rebuild it. You know, it's supposed to be a quick and easy motor swap. Otherwise, I wouldn't have messed with it. Now, there's just a bunch of 8mm bolts to hold this on. If I did mess the starter gear up or something, it's not that big a deal because I have one from the other motor that came out of this. I can't think of anything else that would bind it up to not let it turn over. You don't have a clutch on it. The only other thing is this. Let that loose. Holy hell, that looks like shit. No way, come on. There's just no way. How is this engine locked up? No. No. That is not good. I'm gonna get this plug out of here. See what it looks like. I did have a new plug waiting on hand just because. See if I can get that to focus on there. So that's what the plug looks like. I don't have any type of specialized camera to point down into the spark plug hole, and I don't see anything out of place or odd or anything. So I'm gonna try to turn it over again on the other side by hand with no plug in it and see what it does. Nothing. So I sprayed out the spark plug hole and that intake valve is definitely open right now. I'm gonna try some Marvel Mist Oil in it for a few hours, see if we can rock it backwards, see if that'll free it up, because otherwise that seems like it either needs something with the top end or a new crank. Now I have both of them, but that's a lot of extra work. And I believe, yeah, these are steel bore cylinders on the 330s. That is a good top end right there. I mean, this motor was in better shape than that one. And I was just hoping to be able to throw the carb and everything on it and be able to whip it today. I don't know what would have caused it to do this. Definitely not a good start to this week either. This is the first week in the new shop. First full week. Last week we did all the moving in. All right, so I put Marvel Mist Oil on it, put a little bit of force into it, and I got it turned over. Now I've actually used this before on a dirt bike, doing the Marvel Mist Oil in the cylinder. And it worked out. I rode the hell out of that dirt bike and it actually worked good. It was just slightly locked up on that bike. And I think that's what this was too. Now you see me turning it over real easy. That's mostly because there's no spark plug in it. I'm trying to get as much of that out of there as I can. As much of it worked into the cylinder as I can. And hopefully when we go to put the carburetor and stuff on this today, that this doesn't become like a major issue. Smokes or something like that. It could have just been just slight rust in there from the guy I bought it from. The carb was barely on it. Just happened to turn over for me and start right up. Worst case, I end up having to rebuild the top end, but I'm not gonna sell it if I think it's gonna be a piece of shit. Doesn't feel like there's any like hard spots. Years ago, I bought a Kawasaki Mojave. Now I bought the bike for parts because I had no interest in fixing it because it was in such bad shape physically. But I needed the electronics on it for a clean, nice Mojave I had. When I pulled that cylinder off, it was filled with rust, but didn't smoke, ran great. And it was just, the rest of the quad was completely flat. So we got the carb in, got the boot we were missing in. Everything's not quite lining up, and I don't know why. I have to come back to that, but we're gonna fire it up and make sure this thing runs. It is gonna smoke a bit at first because of how much marble Mr. Oil I put in it. RPMs are actually running at. I think 06 when they changed body styles and they got the front box thing. That's when you could actually run and get the RPMs on your gauge. But now I guess it's time to kill it, and we will get it put back together. For the most part, I'm going to put the front plastic back on the shed, take it for a spin, see how it drives. We're all set up for a temporary test drive. Aside from the one most important thing you need to ride this thing, gasoline. We're going to put some gas in there, hopefully we don't have any leaks. And hopefully the pump on it works. It's got the pneumatic pump, I believe that's how you work that. It operates off vacuum. And hopefully the petcock's not trash. But I don't think it is. So far, aside from whatever's vibrating up there, oh, there's the plate. No big deal. Brakes are working. God, my trails are overgrown. Everything looks good. Not smoking, not burning nothing. Power's all there. Been riding my Outlander all day, so this thing does feel goofy to me. Let's test out the four-wheel drive. Well, that's not good. Probably gonna have to toy with the idle a little bit. broke off the pipe that has oil on it. No big deal. Four-wheel drive's definitely working. That's what I'm saying. Yep, four-wheel drive works good. Try to let it get warmed up. We rode it around a little bit. This right here, the gasket in between those two is definitely leaking. That's not a big deal. I have one. I just have to figure out where it is since we moved into the new shop. It's somewhere in here. I'm gonna locate that, and I'm gonna let this pipe cool down because it is definitely too hot for me to want to mess with. So I'll probably go eat dinner. Should be cooled down by then. But overall, it's running good. Has a weird little bog on the top end, which is normal if you got an exhaust leak like that. That's not crazy. Four-wheel drive's working, speedometer's working, shift's good. It died on me one more time, but then after a few times, I also let it sit there and it didn't die. That also could be contributed to the exhaust leak. I'm not gonna tinker with anything until that is actually taken care of.
This is relatively easy to swap out. The hardest part was finding it in the shop since for some reason in my head it's a white box, and it turns out it's a brown one.
It's a pain in the ass if you don't have one of these. Yeah, you can look at that and tell it didn't have a good seal to begin with, but luckily Polaris basically made these very universal. Shit, I hope so.
Not for this one, evidently.
Dang it. Alright, well, it looks like I'm gonna have to order that. Hopefully I can get it quickly. Right. Now I'd like to say this thing went nice, smooth, and easy, but it did not. So that's the downside to buying Chinese carburetors. So it came with this big old fat sack of jets, and I tried a bunch of them, and I was chasing some other issues. I did find one other issue I had. It's just multiple issues, most of them in regards to the carburetor. There was a nipple on top of it right here. This hits the mounting bracket. No good. I ended up having to get the one off the other carb, swap it on, fix it a little bit because I had pinched a hole in the nipple, and it's such a small pinhole. I didn't even think I can show you that. Yeah, it's probably not. Pinched a hole in it, caused an air leak. The jets this thing comes with is everything from 145 all the way up 180. The 180 was in it. So when it wasn't running good, and I was, this carb was listed specifically for the Magnum. So we'll try the 180. Maybe they're going off of some different jetting size, you know, Chinese jetting or something like that. No, that made it absolutely run. I barely made it up the hill to get back in the shop. So back and forth carb on and off a couple times today, probably 5 or 6 times. And I finally decided, you know what is the factory jets? Because I couldn't just swap factory jets in. For one, well, this isn't the factory carb. I don't know where I put it. For one, it didn't have a factory carb on it to begin with. For two, the parts bike that did have a factory carb that was destroyed didn't have jets in it. Two, Chinese carbs don't take factory jets. And that's not necessarily true on all of them because the LTZ definitely has factory jets in a Chinese carb. Carb was on it when I got it, and I know for a fact that they're factory jets because I put them in there. OEM Keen or OEM Mikuni, whatever comes on that. I tried the fuel pump, I tried everything until I finally decided to say, you know what? I'm gonna go to my bucket of Chinese carburetors I got over there that are specifically for parts, you know, the little screw, just the little things that end up being annoying because you lost it. I have a whole bunch of them saved up. And lo and behold, I find a 125 main jet. It looked a little off, but I threw it in here and worked great. It was smaller than these style jets right here, that typical in a Polaris, but it worked, so I ain't gonna complain about that. Now, she's purring like a kitten, running good. The exhaust leak I was actually able to fix after I took some time and thought about it, and I was looking at it. One of these springs, especially this one down here on the bottom, for some reason is way more extended than the rest. So I looked at it and it was just like, it wasn't as much tensile strength on it. So I swapped it out with another used spring I had here. Fixed that exhaust leak right up. No problemo. Aside from that, I ended up having to swap the throttle cable out because the one that was on here was janky. So we're gonna get this thing put back together and she can go out for sale. So we're done. Now, in all honesty, I wish I had, I don't have water out here at the shop yet to be able to wash this with. So we are stuck with washing it by hand, which this machine isn't too bad. I was able to wash it by hand and it didn't turn out too bad. And I bet you're wondering, why did I spray all the WD-40 on it? That started as a thing when I was taking these out to ride them before they'd go up for sale or anything like that. And I'd get it covered in mud. Once it's covered in mud, it sucks washing these things. Especially when you may have a prospective buyer coming or something like that. And you've got to go through and detail this thing. So what I started doing was washing, putting WD-40 on them. And I started noticing on my wife's quad, it doesn't work with all the plastics. Some plastics sometimes just is too far gone. So like part of her footwells, it'll look good for 2 or 3 weeks, but after one wash, it's gone. But the rest of the plastics, they look good for 2, 3, 4 rides. Now, my preference to do this with is to basically douse the whole machine in WD-40. So anything that's dirty, it comes off super easy. It also gives it a nice shine. The only downside is it smells like WD-40 if that bothers you. So what I do is after I douse it, I let it sit for a minute, marinate's what I call it. And then I will spray it down again with a water hose, lightly, not like pressure washer, until you start to see all the white stuff roll off of it. You just have to see what I mean. Do it to see what I mean. And it keeps them looking new. Now this one didn't need it as bad, because as you can see, like the racks and everything, like these Polaris racks are real bad about getting to where the fiberglass in the racks will just eat your hands up, eat your arms up. You get it on your arms, it just sucks. These haven't got to that. They're probably the nicest Polaris racks I've ever seen of this style. I am still gonna probably take it and go wash it because that doesn't clean all the wheels and tires and stuff, but I live on a dirt road and there's not a whole lot I can do about that. I think it turned out nice. This thing kind of whooped my ass, but I learned a few things and that's all good. You know, next time I go to buy a non-OEM carb, which don't get me wrong, if I were keeping it, I'd probably put an OEM carb for long-term longevity. The non-OEM stuff does still work pretty decent. LTZ's carb, I've had that on there for over a year and it still works great. And it's not OEM. Next go around, I'd probably pick one because I was about to order a whole nother carb and I noticed the niche carb actually says that it comes with a 125 main at 42.5 pilot jet. It also doesn't have the nipple on the back of it. So moving forward, I probably won't use the known name brand type carburetors anymore. This had a name brand, but not a big name like Niche, somebody who actually probably put some thought into what they're building. Now I think this thing will be worth, give or take, I mean, the market speaks for itself. I think if it ends up at the auction, it'll brush up $2,000. Marketplace, I think 16, 17, only because just because, yes, it's a clean quad, but at the end of the day, it's still only a 330. And I did sell, what was that? It was a Prairie 300 4x4, maybe about a year ago for $2,000. And I mean, it was mint condition for a Prairie. Those usually don't have ugly looking plastics. They don't fade the same as everybody else's does. When you deal with used parts as long as I did, you kind of know what some of the parts that are a little harder to get a hold of, where like these storage boxes, unlike all Polarises, are hard to get a hold of, or they're not cheap. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you think this thing would sell for in your area. Like, I believe up north, this right here is worth a lot more.